So I'm going to lead us in a brief prayer. Thank you, Lord Jesus, that we have this opportunity to give back to you, the creature giving back to their Creator. It's both joy and humbling to have this opportunity. I pray that all the monies collected go for your work to build up our community and following you. Thank you, Lord.
To die.
welcoming Teen Challenge to our service this morning, and they're going to share a presentation with us. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Emily, and I'm the Development and Events Coordinator with Teen Challenge Atlantic Men's Center in Memramcook, New Brunswick. It is an honor to be here today with all of you, and today I bring the front row here. So I'll just do a quick introduction of them, and then I'll kind of get into more about Teen Challenge. So with me today I have John. John, just want to give a wave. And we have Gary. We have Patty, who's not a man at the center, but she is an awesome volunteer. And we have Gord. So we love to be able to come into the house of God and not only see what's going on in our lives and what's happening at the center, but see what's going on in your lives and what's happening in your church. So it is really an honor to be here today, so thank you for having us. There's no better way to find out about this ministry than hearing it right from the students themselves, and so we do have a few people that are going to share about that today. Is there anyone here who has not heard of Teen Challenge? Would you just raise your hand? Or has everybody heard of Teen Challenge? Anybody not really know what we do? Does anybody think it's for teenagers? Because that's a confusion that I also thought, that it's actually not for teenagers, like 18 or 19. So we just hope that this morning, through the message that you hear from each one that we'll be sharing, that if there's somebody that you know that is struggling with addiction, so drug, or alcohol, that you'll just hear a message of hope, and that you'll know that there is an opportunity to share with somebody that you may know in your community. Maybe it's a family member, but that we just really hope that you will hear that message loud and clear today. So for those of you that are maybe not familiar or have heard of it, because I know that Shediac Bay Community Church is a great supporter of Teen Challenge, so we thank you for that, and we thank you for the women's ministry that we've met Debbie and several of the other ladies that have come out to the center, and thank you for the food that I see at the back, so that's wonderful, right guys? Yeah? Awesome. So for those of you that are not really familiar with it, or just in case you're not, it is a 12-month residential program, and it is faith-based. So the men come and they live at the center in Memramcook, and there are several other ones across Canada, and I'll talk a bit about that in a few minutes. But they come and they live there, and it is a safe place for the men. It's a little outside of the city, like 20 minutes outside of Dieppe, so it's good and it's safe. There we offer spiritual, vocational, work therapy. The guys have learned to be really good in the kitchen. Gary, you guys all have your chance. So there's life coaching, and the students are encouraged to get the counseling that brought them to this place in the first place, because we all know that we don't turn to drugs and alcohol for no reason, right? So our main priority is to ensure that we are committed to the men that we serve here at Teen Challenge. So Teen Challenge bought the land in Memramcook in 2005, opened the doors in 2006. We had our first graduation, and we've been kind of on the trend, the upward trend of our graduations since then. We are currently a 14-bed facility, but we have already started the process of renovating and getting ready for 24 beds as of November 1st. So it's really exciting times for the Maritimes and for us at the center as well. Hallelujah. Amen. The Teen Challenge in general was started over 60 years ago by a man named David Wilkerson. Has anybody read The Cross and the Switchblade? Awesome. So I'll share a little bit about his story, but we do have a few copies of The Cross and the Switchblade, and that is the story of David Wilkerson, who started Teen Challenge in 1958. So David Wilkerson was a pastor in a small town in Pennsylvania, and he felt led to go to New York City after reading an article in the Life magazine about 7 teenagers that were on trial for murder. They were gang members, and he wanted to go and meet with them. And so that is what he did. He followed the prompting of the Spirit, and he went. And he had a few challenges, and in case you want to read the book, I won't give you all the details, but from that point, he built a relationship with the gang, the teenagers there, and it wasn't long after that that he started Teen Challenge. At first it was for teenagers. It wasn't long after it started that he realized that it was more than just teenagers that needed the help. And so that's when it became an adult center as well. In Canada, due to government laws, we cannot have teenagers under 18, so that is why we call it the Teen Challenge Men's Center. We stuck with the name, but it is for men of all ages, 18 and over in Canada. So all because of one man's obedience, Teen Challenge is now, we have 6 centers across Canada, and we are affiliated with over 1,100 Teen Challenges in 110 different countries. So awesome, same message, a little bit different programs, but the same message, so that Jesus saves. So it's wonderful. Right now, I'll actually invite John to come up, and John is just going to answer a few questions for us. Thank you. So I'll just start, and I'll move over. Everybody can hear me? Okay?
Yeah.
In the back? Okay. So first of all, John, how old are you, and where are you from?
I'm 21 years old. I'm turning 22 in 2 months. I'm also from Chicago, Illinois, and I've lived most of my life in Canada.
And what was life like growing up for you?
Life, as all of you know, is kind of like, it's not like a box of chocolates, but it's like it's kind of a roller coaster, and for me, it's no different. I grew up pretty average. I had lots of friends growing up, a lot of quiet time, a lot of downtime, but I was also in a lot of sports and different activities. But I sadly fell into the addiction around 14 years old to all sorts of things. I'll explain that in a second.
Right on script. No, I'm just kidding. When were you first introduced to drugs and alcohol, or drugs or alcohol?
So my first introduction to drugs and alcohol was, I would say it was through my aunt and uncle, sort of. It was, they owned beer and wine shops all across Ontario, where I'm from, well, where I've lived, and I would say I was sneaking beers and wine and drinks, spirits, since I was 13, 14 years old, so I would say a little bit of a rebellious soul to start, and then when I was about 14 years old, I tried marijuana, and that was through a friend of a friend who just came up to me, and I fell into the path of many other people my age, just peer pressure and wanting to fit the part.
Thank you. Thank you, John. And what was your rock bottom with addiction? What brought you to the point where you came to Teen Challenge?
I would say rock bottom for me was not having money to support myself, being to the point of an addiction where I could have been homeless and I could have been living on the street, living with no motivation, really just a lost soul. So overall, to put it short but sweet, a rock bottom just would be not caring, not really caring what I get up and do each day, but finally I came here, and it's been helping, but overall it's still an everyday battle. I would definitely say that, but rock bottom, it's far behind me, and I've been talking with a counselor lately who's been helping me, remind me of the good things I have in life and remind me of the blessings that God does provide for me.
Thank you, John. stuck. So that is another reason why you got here. Hey, John? Thank you for sharing. So that is just one of the brief stories that you'll hear this morning. But it is such a pleasure for me to be able to work with these guys and to hear their stories, to see where they've come from and where they're going, where they're headed, and their plans for the future. And so it's just, I love it. It's great. We love to be able to come and share in places such as this, and we thank you for your support and your encouragement. Before I go any further with my part, I'm going to invite Gary up, and Gary is going to share for a few minutes just on what brought him here and plans for the future.
I'm going to take this right off. I'm going to be a rebel. Are we having fun?
Yes.
I want to proclaim the name of the Lord. Oh, praise the greatness of our God. He is the rock. All of his work is perfect, and his ways are just. A faithful God who will do no wrong. An upright and just God is he. That came from Deuteronomy. I just love praising the name of the Lord and proclaiming his name. So I just like to start with that. Once again, as Emily mentioned, my name is Gary, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, how I got to come not only to this beautiful church and gathering, but to Atlantic Canada and to the mountain area. So I was born in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Any prairie dogs here? No. Nobody? There's usually at least one person from out west, but I was born in Saskatoon, youngest of 7 kids. I grew up in the church, I had a great family. I was a typical teenage kid. I was partying and having fun. I dabbled in smoking drugs and that kind of stuff, but I really didn't take it too serious. I had a goal, I had a dream, and my dream growing up was to be a professional photographer, and so that's what I did. Out of high school, I was with a woman, my high school sweetheart, and I got into the photography industry, and life was going good. I thought my life was just going to just go on. We're going to get married, we're going to have kids, and all that fun stuff. But it didn't happen. This woman broke my heart really bad, and I was young, and so I turned away from everything. I turned away from all my core values. I turned away from my family. I turned away from God, and I stopped going to church, and I stopped praying. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go out there in this world, and I'm never going to be hurt again like this again by anybody. Nobody's going to hurt me. In fact, I don't need help from the church or my family. I'm going to go out there in the world, and I'm going to do this all on my own. And so I did. I left to Calgary, Alberta, and I started my photography business, and life was good. I started seeing my photography in magazine covers and advertising campaigns that ran across the country and billboards. And I had a downtown photo studio. I had a team of photographers working for me. I had a condo up in the sky looking over Calgary. And there's a time in my life that I was still partying, I was still drinking, and I was still doing drugs. And I remember being out on my balcony of this condo, and I said, look what I've done. Look what everything I've built. I'm on top of the world. I did this. But in 1 Corinthians, it says, he who boasts only in the Lord. And I didn't know the Lord. I turned away from the Lord. I walked away. And with all that success that I thought I had carried on a terrible cocaine addiction that started tearing my life apart systematically. I started isolating myself. I started partying for days on end in my studio and in my condo, and I'm just losing myself. The drugs got worse. I started dealing with more and more harder drugs, and eventually I started losing everything. I started losing all my clients. They didn't want to work with this guy anymore. My family didn't know what to do with me because they were so far away. My friends didn't want to be my friends anymore. And I ended up in the hospital. I had severe drug psychosis from the drugs that I was taking. And I woke up in the hospital, and my father came, and I remember looking through the window, And he came to get his son back. My sister came to get her brother back. My little nieces were there, and they wanted their uncle back. And so they took me home. They packed my stuff up, and they took me back home to Saskatchewan. And I was devastated. I lost everything. I remember waking up in my sister's house thinking, how did I get here? What happened, you know? And I was depressed. I started drinking heavily. I hadn't touched drugs since then, which is a small victory, and I say small victory because I started drinking and burying myself in the bottle. I started rebuilding my life. I was still doing some photography, but I was in construction. And I met a woman who I fell in love with, and she had a little daughter who I adored. But after a short time of dating, Tracy was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and she died. And once again, I was devastated, and I was mad. And once again, I turned away from God. I became a fall-down drunk. I dove into that bottle. I was woke up in police stations. I was woke up in drunk tanks. I was woke up in hospitals. This new career that I started for me, I started losing it again. And I tried treatment centers, 30-day government treatment centers, and they didn't work. I was going in and out of detox centers. And in fact, one night before I was to go into another detox center, because I had nowhere to live, I lost my home, I lost my career again. My sister phoned me and said, there's an article in the newspaper about this man who's about your age, and he lost everything he owned. And he went to this place called Teen Challenge, and she told me all about it. And I said the 3 things that most of us had said. First of all, I'm not a teenager. Second of all, it's a year long. And third of all, it's faith-based. And as I mentioned, I walked away from God. I didn't want anything to do with it. So I went into this detox center this night. And I remember thinking, can I really stay in a place like this? And so I did something that I hadn't done in 20 years. I went upstairs, I knelt down, and I prayed to God. And I said, if you're still there, if you're not angry with me, give me a sign. Let me know if I need to go into this program. The very next day, I woke up, went downstairs for breakfast, and a new guy came in. And I knew him from the streets. His name is Mark David. And he was like, he's just glowing. He was like, hey, brother, what are you doing? Like, before I knew him, he was in rough shape. Now he's glowing. And I'm like, what's going on with you? He said, well, I'm only here for a few days, but I'm going to this place called Teen Challenge. You should come with me. And I said, wow, okay, God. So he helped me fill out the forms. And I did that. I went to Teen Challenge in Saskatchewan. As Emily mentioned, we have centers across Canada. And I'm a graduate of Teen Challenge. I spent the 12 months there. And life was good. And I left the program. And guess what I did? Look what I've done. I started boasting again. My pride got in. I said, look what I spent a year at Teen Challenge. I can do anything I want. And I started drinking again. 10 months later, I was waking up in jail cells again. I woke up in a hospital again. My family just couldn't deal with it anymore. I was worse off than I ever was. And so I couldn't live with myself. So I drove out to a parking lot outside of Saskatoon, and I was just going to end my life. I had a hose. I was going to hook it up to the exhaust of my car. I was crying out to the Lord, and I was saying, I'm sorry, I can't do this any longer. When my text started vibrating, and I thought, who is texting me at this hour? And it was a sponsor of mine from the Teen Challenge program that I hadn't talked to in over 10 months. She said a couple simple words. She said, Gary, the Holy Spirit told me to pray for you tonight. Are you okay? And at that moment, I knew that I was that one lost sheep that went off, and God said, no, son, I am not leaving you. I knew at that moment that God came and he reached out and he used this person, and this person was obedient. She listened. She reached out to me. In fact, she paid for all my provisions. She flew me to London, Ontario, to the other men's center. It's in there. And this is a story of how I was obedient to God and how this changed the course of my life. Because in Saskatchewan, I got to know this book. I got to know Christ. I was introduced to him, but I didn't actually know him. Since I've been in this program, I'm doing a refresher. So when you graduate Teen Challenge, and if you need more time in the program, they'll bring you back for a 6-month refresher. Since I've been starting my refresher, I've got to know this book, I've got to know Christ, and I've got to know him on an intimate level. In fact, I got sent here to Moncton to finish up my refresher. I'll be done in a month. And coming over here in the plane from London, I kept hearing the words, persevere, persevere. You know, I'm going through my mind everything that I've lost in my life. I'm single, I have no home, I lost my business, and I just felt like a loser. But I just kept on hearing these words, persevere, persevere. And in Romans, Paul talks about that we should rejoice in our sufferings, because in your sufferings it produces perseverance, and perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. And without hope, I'm a goner. Without hope, I just give up now, but I now have hope, and I'm persevering to fight this addiction, to carry on this word. In Joshua it says, do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night. And again, in Romans, it talks about transforming your mind. I couldn't remember a phone number before I got into this program. Now I'm memorizing scripture like it's just flowing out to me. The truth that's coming out of this book and the hope that's coming out of this book has like changed my life forever. And so that's a little bit about me, and that's a little bit of what Christ has done in my life, the faithfulness, the obedience, and I owe it all to God, all glory to God now. So thank you for listening, and I hope to chat with you later.
Amen.
Thank you, Gary. Love hearing the stories of redemption and grace. And it's great. I just want to take a few minutes now to tell a story about how I first heard about Teen Challenge myself. 11 years ago, there was a girl from Moncton who I'll refer to as an acquaintance. She was married to a heroin addict, and they were often one paycheck away from losing their home. She had desperately tried to love him to sobriety. She thought that by attending NA meetings, counseling sessions, sitting in methadone clinics, being by his bedside during hospital visits after overdoses and drug-induced seizures, forgiving him lie after lie, helping him shoot up after the begging became unbearable and because he was just too weak, holding him as he cried because the pain he had mentally was just too much. That all of these things would be enough to make him clean. She even tried church a few times, thinking that being inside the building would save him and them. These attempts left her feeling hopeless and completely broken, wondering what her purpose was. That girl was me. In the fall of 2007, my mother invited me to go to a local church to hear the Teen Challenge choir. I didn't really have an interest in listening to teenagers sing, is my response to her, when she went on to explain that they were actually men in recovery from addictions just like her husband, my husband. She had my attention, and so I went. There was a few other things that had happened in that fall in my life that were really trying to get my attention, and I went. I showed up to the first of 2 services at that church in October, and I was moved. I was so moved by what I saw, the joy on the men's faces, singing, praising Jesus, and I thought, that's something we haven't tried. We've tried church, but we haven't tried Jesus. So I was not only moved by what I saw, but I was a little curious, and I thought, I'm going to stay for the second service. I want to just kind of see if that's real. It was during that second service that something really weird was happening. I was the person that lived paycheck to paycheck, as I guess we all kind of do, but I didn't really know if we would have a place to live the next month. But I also felt that day moved to sponsor a student, which I thought was kind of impossible, but I kept feeling the prompting throughout the second service. So I talked to my mom about it, and she said, well, that's what we call a step of faith. And she said, you know, when we do things for God, that God will find a way and help you find a way. So my first question when I went to the table to ask about sponsorship was, can I cancel anytime? Because I really thought I'm probably going to have to cancel this sponsorship. But I stand here today to tell you that that was just the beginning of things that were happening in our lives. I did start to sponsor a student, never had a bounce check since, so I call that a major glory in my life. And it was just really a pivotal moment to be able to start to sponsor students. I brought the sponsorship card home, told my husband about it. He wasn't interested. He didn't go to the choir at that time. But I was desperate, and so anyway, that kind of took a different route, really. After encountering Jesus that day was the beginning of a new chapter, really, in my life, because when I felt the Spirit stirring, even though I don't think I fully understood what the Spirit was doing, it was definitely a step in the right direction for me. My husband was not ready for this clean lifestyle, and he wasn't ready for this kind of help. I wanted to move forward in life. I wanted to have children and to start a family, and I was tired. I was tired of just breathing, living but not actually living. A month before our 6-year wedding anniversary and 2 previous breakups, a lot of water under the bridge, we came to the decision to split. He was tired of watching me in the sidelines, trying to cheer him on, and he saw how tired I was. And although the marriage was over, I had promised that I would not give up on him, and we both trusted and believed that. Fast forwarding a little bit of time, I completely had then surrendered my whole life to Christ, and I have felt God's grace over and over and over. I felt peace in all of what was going on, and I prayed for a second chance at being a wife and a mother. I prayed that if there was someone else out there for me, that he would be understanding of my life before him, maybe even be a musician, and that I was still committed to protect and support my first husband. God restored it all, even greater than I could have imagined. That pivotal moment, almost 11 years ago, completely changed the course of my life. God has blessed me with a loving, understanding, God-loving man who graduated Teen Challenge in 2008. And in 2009, we invited my first husband to attend a choir tour for the next, I guess it was one of the next few that they did. He entered the program in 2009, gave his life to Christ, and has been serving the Lord and freed from the bondage that he was in. He is remarried. He has 3 children. I have 2 children. And so as much as the story wasn't exactly maybe what I initially thought it might be, it was still a lot of restoration and a lot of families that were restored because of it. We were both remarried in 2010, and God is good. I just stand here today to tell you and remind you that if your story or someone that you know has a story that looks similar to that it's not always the ending we may have hoped for, but he certainly gives grace. So thank you for letting me share a personal story with you. I'm going to invite Gord up, and he's going to share for just a few minutes on what brought him to Teen Challenge. Gord.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Forgive me, I'm awfully nervous. Public speaking is not my thing. And I think for the second part, the main reason I'm nervous up here is because the devil, the enemy keeps lying. You know what I mean? Telling me you're a loser, you're a drug addict. But the truth of the matter is I'm a child of God. God doesn't make junk. He thought I was worth dying for. So I'm up here today to share my story. Because I'm sure if we all think about it, we don't have to think too long before we can think of somebody who's in addiction. So hopefully my story will be a story of hope and restoration. So, like I said, like Emily said, my name is Gordon. I'm from Sarnia, Ontario. And my parents immigrated to Canada from Croatia. So I was born in your typical old school European home. My mom gave up her career to raise my sister and I. And my father, he worked very hard to provide the things that he never received growing up. Alcoholism runs in his side of the family. His mom died when he was 9. His father was a brutal alcoholic, and my dad and his brother spent their childhood in orphanages back in Europe at that time. He doesn't speak much, but I can only imagine what he went through. So my dad didn't know how to show love. I remember being a kid and feeling uncomfortable going up to him, giving him a hug and kiss on his birthday, because he just wasn't very loving. But thankfully, my mom, she got saved when we were very young, and she took us to church. And I went to a church that was very strict, 3 times a week, twice on Sunday. So I knew a lot about God. I knew God, but I didn't have him. I didn't have a relationship with him. And like Gary says, unless I have that relationship, I don't have anything. So slowly, as I got older, probably right around the age of 16, when I was able to drive, the devil started luring me away from my family, and who loved me, and from God, who loved me way more. I remember saying, each and every one of us are only a couple of bad decisions away from being really messed up. And I believe that's one of the worst decisions I made when I started to walk away from God and the church and that whole community there. But when I was 18, I went to London to go to school for mechanic. My dad opened up a transmission shop, and I was working with him, and it was time for me to go to school to get my Class A, but that didn't last very long because, like I said, it was a pretty strict household, and now I'm 18, living on my own, going to school, and I just went, I didn't go to class, and that didn't last long for about a couple months, and I started working at a nightclub, and I dropped out of school, and my parents wanted me to come and move back home, but I decided that I wasn't going to, and I moved in with a girl that I worked with, and I stayed there. That unhealthy relationship lasted about 10 years. The whole nightclub lifestyle just engulfed me, and drinking and drugs started, and we moved from London to Hamilton to Toronto, thinking that a change of location would be the answer to my riotous living. But as the addiction turned to, or as the partying turned to addiction, moving wasn't the answer. And then finally, we broke up because me on drugs and me sober are 2 very different people. So then I moved home, addicted, and I thought that was rock bottom, but that was nothing to what was coming next. Due to a couple of injuries, I was prescribed opiates, and life became so much more darker and eviler. And that carried on. I was addicted to opiates for about 10 years. But before that time, I remember talking on the phone. My mom had this pastor call me up, and he was having addiction. Then he turned his life around and gave his life to Jesus, and now he was a pastor. And he asked me, Gordon, are you into needles yet? And I was petrified of needles. And proudly I said no. I looked down on people who use them. And his answer to me was, give it time. And I remember the very first time I stuck a needle in my arm, and his voice came to my head, give it time. And I bawled like a baby. And life was just brutal. I had a very dark night one night, and I was never just just not wanting to live. And thankfully the Lord spared my life. And that weekend I went out to PEI to a pastor's friend. He was having meetings, and I went out there and I got saved. And wow, instantly, total joy, peace, happiness. I was on 95 mils of methanol and I came off of that cold turkey the next day. No withdrawal symptoms or nothing. And the miracles didn't stop there. I was on fire for God. I love reading, I love praying. He brought a beautiful Christian girl into my life, and shortly after we became engaged. Sad to say, I started taking my eyes off of him and paying more attention to the miracles that he blessed me with, and I relapsed. And this petrified her. She ran, and that threw me into a depression like no other. And I continued to use drugs and relapsing. And there's nothing more depressing than being saved and not walking with God. And once again, just depressed, suicidal. But thankfully, I had some good Christian support, like a mother who never stopped praying for me, and my neighbor, Lawrence, who was a pastor, and he just constantly kept praying, and they kept suggesting Teen Challenge. And on October 31st of last year, I entered the program. And Mom can sleep peacefully now. She knows where I am. But the best thing is I'm restoring that relationship that I had with Christ when I first got saved. I love reading. I love praying. I love the peace that only Jesus can give. I start my days with my devotions and my Bible versus what I was doing before. And thank God for that. I owe my life to Teen Challenge. I've been to many other rehab centers. This is number 8. But nothing else really worked for me. I've been to many NA meetings and AA meetings, and I'm not, for me it didn't work. Here we have one step, and I get to go straight to Jesus, and he said it is finished, so I don't have to do anything except keep my eyes on him, thank God. And he's gonna give me abundant life. And yeah, so I just thank you for having us. Thank you for listening, and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Gord. After I hear some of these stories, I don't even really sometimes know what to say, but I can relate to the praying mother. And I'm sure a lot of you are praying mothers here, or saved because of a praying mother, or praying parents. So that's awesome. Amen. Amen. That's right. I hope by sharing my own personal story a few minutes ago that I didn't make you think that if you sponsor someone that you're going to have to get a husband from that. Most of us have one, I guess, or anyway. So it should be no surprise that that we come here and we share stories with you. And I just want to encourage you that if you are interested in sponsoring, then please come see us at the back after the service. You will get, this is John's lovely face, you'll get a sponsorship card like that can be put on the fridge. You can be praying for him. But you know what, really, our center operates, of course, financially, but prayerfully. And if you're not able to sponsor, that is okay. We just will covet your prayers because God will provide. And just in case you are looking for some information about the program, if you know of anybody that may require a program such as this, it is $1,100 for the year. So there's not many places that you can live off of $1,100 a year, but of course our sponsorship program is another key resource for us. It costs a lot to feed so many men, and we're about to double, or almost double. So, but we trust God. We trust God for that. So again, if you could be praying, we have the expansion coming up, and as Barbara mentioned this morning, we have the Freedom Run, which is next Saturday morning in Memram Cook on our property. It's a beautiful property, and hopefully the leaves will be a little more changed by then. So that's really, I guess, all I wanted to say. And as we get ready to close from our part of the service, I just want to challenge you almost to be thinking over the next couple of minutes who you may have in your life, and maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's a friend's child, maybe it's your child, maybe it's you. And we have a prayer box back at the center that's in our chapel that the guys pray over. So what that is just, I'm gonna ask you to stand in the gap for someone that's not here today. If you have or know somebody that is struggling, inside the pamphlets that you received, there was a little piece of white paper, looks like this. And I'm going to invite Patty, our volunteer, and Gary. They're going to come up front. And if you would take this piece of paper and you would think of whoever it is that's struggling, whether it's drugs, alcohol, or maybe it's even an unsaved loved one. And I know that the list can probably be quite long, unfortunately. But you know what? We got some time. We got a few minutes. So if you would be thinking about whose name would be on there and just stand in the gap, I'm going to ask you to step out in faith today and come up and put their name on a piece of paper, and they're going to have the baskets. They're going to collect those names, and I'll pray for them here. But our commitment to you is that we will take those back, and we will be praying for these loved ones of yours. So I'll ask you to think over the next couple minutes, and they'll come. And as they come, this special volunteer that I referred to a few minutes ago is very special because she is the mother that prayed for me. She is my mom. And she prayed for me for a lot of years. So she will be happy. If you don't have a white paper, just raise your hand and they will bring one. We have pens as well, so I'll give you a couple of minutes. And when you're ready, you come. So again, if you don't have a paper or you have a paper and you want somebody to come to you, just kind of raise your hand and Gary or my mother, Patty, will come. Just give it a couple more minutes. If you're still thinking or you're still deciding, we can certainly add these to the baskets in just a moment. But first of all, I'm just going to pray over the names that are in this basket. So would you join me in prayer? Father God, I thank you for putting the names in this basket on the people that came on their hearts, God. I just ask that you, whatever it is that their need is, God, that you would just bless them where they are right now and soften their hearts to you, God, and just direct them, God. If it's somebody that needs to be put into their path, God, I just ask that you would be putting in bold, heart-softening ways that you would be sending people to whoever needs you, God. Just thank you for the people being bold and stepping out in faith today, God. I just pray for them as well for doing that and standing in the gap for these people that are not with us this morning necessarily, or that just need your grace, and your grace is sufficient. We thank you, God, for the people of Shediac Bay Community Church and the community here in Shediac. We just ask that you bless them, and we thank you for all of your blessings. In your name we pray. Amen. So that's all for us this morning, so I will hand it back over to Barbara. But please feel free to come see us. We have a table at the back. If you have not read Crossing the Switchblade, then there are a few copies back there. And if you have any questions at all that we didn't answer, we would ask that you would come see us. So thank you again for having us. Bless you.
goodness of God and reminding us that He's in the miracle business and the restoration business. At this time, we're going to have a special offering for our friends from Team Challenge and help them out with their expansion process. And I would encourage, myself included, to give generously. Before I close in prayer, I would like to remind you that Team Challenge group will be by their table, and please feel free to speak with any of the group, and they'd love to connect with you. WMS members are invited to stay afterwards to share a meal with the Team Challenge group before they head home. So, Lord, thank you for this opportunity that we had this morning to learn more about your goodness and your saving power. As we embark on this upcoming week, help us to expect your miracles in our life. We know them, Lord, that you do miracles, but I'm not so sure we always expect them. Help us to expect your miracles. Amen.
Oh, I think you're right.